So, without any further delays, let's get started. We're going to go and, of course, get started. We're going to go in Bloomberg order. So, we're going to start with the white cards. So, the first card is X card Braggarts. So, a 4 mana 3/3 Dwarf Warrior. Has Boast for 2. It says untap it and put a counter on it. So, honestly, like as far as limited is concerned, I think this is probably a pretty reasonable common. Grey Ogre is never, sorry, not a Grey Ogre, rather, a Hill Giant is never a terrible thing. And this one has the potential to grow and sort of grant itself, obviously, like pseudo vigilance. I think the biggest thing I'm going to be curious to see, and this is really hard to say without actually playing the format, is basically how often you're going to have the mana to use the Boast ability on a creature with Boast. Because, again, these do have, like, not insubstantial mana costs, and they're going to mean that you're potentially making the choice between boasting a creature on attacks and actually playing a new spell. So let the record show that all of these abilities that I'm going to be describing are sort of with the caveat that boast is realistic. If boast winds up just not being that feasible and limited, then a lot of these cards are probably worse than I think they are. But again, assuming that you can boast with any sort of amount of consistency, you're attacking with essentially a 4/4 vigilance the turn after you play this, and then it's just going to get bigger from there. So that seems okay. Not like a super high pick or anything. Obviously, we're still just talking about commons, but I think it'll be just fine. Battle Shield Warrior is our next card. That one is a 3 mana 2/2 human warrior. Also has boast, and this one's boast his ability is again 2 mana. But this one anthems all your creatures, which is to say it gives them +1/+1 until end of turn. So you don't get the permanent stat bonus that Braggart gives you, but you do get the go wide bonus. So if you're attacking with a bunch of small creatures, this can serve to get a whole bunch of extra damage in at a relatively low cost. Again, Boast is there. They did make this one uncommon, so that tells me that they at least anticipate this card being pretty strong in limited. So we will have to see how that goes. Battlefield Raptor is actually pretty interesting. So it's 1 mana 1/2 flying first striker. Generally speaking, 1 mana creatures with 1 power are never super exciting, but having first strike does mean that this thing can tussle pretty well. It has evasion and can do a decent job of like getting through whatever is around that can block it. Notably, I think there's like a lot of like 1/1 bird token types things, and this does win those fights. I don't know. I think this card's interesting. I have no idea if it's actually going to be good, but if there's like if there's like sort of like a red white or white blue aggressive deck, that this definitely could be a key piece in terms of just getting a good curve going. Our next creature is Beskir Shieldmate. So this is a 2 mana 2/1 human warrior. When it dies, you make a 1/1 human warrior creature token. I assume I like this card. It trades pretty reasonably well with stuff. Like, it's going to be pretty good on curve, generally speaking. The fact that it replaces itself, albeit with a 1/1 body, but still, the fact that it doesn't just die and that's it, like, you do get some lasting value out of attacking this into things, means that your opponent might not want to trade for it, which means that you might get a few points of damage in kind of for free. Again, not entirely sure about this one. A lot of these sort of commons are going to really depend on the speed of the limited environment, but it seems like a solid little body to me. Bound in Gold is our next card, and the first removal spell we've seen in white. This card, I think, is quite good, realistically. It's essentially a riff on the card Arrest, but they've traded off the fact that you can use mana abilities for the fact that it also prevents the creature in question from crewing vehicles, which may or may not be relevant. But the bottom line is it's pretty much just 3 mana. It's a 3 mana pacifism with a little bit of upside. So, pretty solid card. Generally speaking, historically cards like this have always been pretty good. So I would expect this to be a reasonably high pick in white. Clarion Spirit is the next card, so that's a 2 mana 2/2. So it's like already fine. It's a grizzly bear. And it gives you the bonus of if you ever cast a second spell, you just get a free 1 white flying spirit. And that seems really good to me. Especially if you're playing like a cheap white aggro, like low curve white aggro deck. playing a couple, like having a 2-spell turn is realistic even as soon as turn 3 and definitely by turn 4, because there are a lot of random 2-drops and 1-drops in these colors from what I've seen. Our next one that also kind of fits into that 2 spells per turn. Notably, the 2 spells per turn is the white-black archetype. And this fits again into that pretty nicely. It's a 1-mana 1/1 vigilance. It's already getting a little bit more bang for your buck on there. And then it says whenever it enters the battlefield, if it was the second spellcaster's turn, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. So I can already see like this fitting nicely into a curve where you go sort of, I don't know, turn 1 something. I don't know, maybe this raptor. You go turn 2 Clarion Spirit, and then on turn 3 you can cast like, I don't know, like a Beskir Shield Mate into a code spell cleric, triggering the spirit, getting a 1/1 token, and then this cleric enters the battlefield, and you can put 1/1 counter on itself. Then 2-mana 1/1, 1-mana 2/2 vigilance, not bad. Or you can put it on the flyer, and now you've got yourself a free 2/2 flyer, just for having cast this spell second. And again, you can do that pretty easily on turn 3 if you go 2-drop into 1-drop. So that seems solid to me. Definitely again, will depend on how good the white aggro decks are, but a lot of value in a side is a very small card for very little mana, and it rewards you sort of doing the thing that color pair wants to be doing. Next we have Divine Gambit, which is, I don't know, probably the most memed on card of this spoiler season. People were very excited about the first line of text and then very unexcited about the second line of text. So 2-mana sorcery. Exile target artifact, creature, or enchantment an opponent controls. So, on the surface, a very flexible and versatile removal spell, except for the part where they then get to put a permanent card from their hand onto the battlefield. So that is the person whose thing just got taken away. And notably, you can only use it on your opponent's stuff. So you can't even use it to, like, polymorph yourself or anything. Or show and tell yourself. Then just gets, like... So, I don't know. I guess it's good if you want to get rid of their bomb. It's like... But if you're trying to use it as like a tempo removal spell or whatever, then they just play their like 6-drop on turn 3 or turn 4 way ahead of curve. Like that's going to be a bad time for you. This card is not good. Don't play this card. This card is a trap, and it will take a lot of convincing to make me believe that this card is ever worth including in your deck. So don't do it. That's my first PSA for here. Just don't put Divine Gambit in your deck. You're probably not going to want it, and it's probably going to backfire horribly. Our next card is Doomscar. So this is our first rare that we've taken a look at, and oh boy, is it a doozy. This card is really, really strong. First and foremost, if we're talking about limited, wrath effects are always like very powerful. They're just sort of the ultimate equalizer, stabilizer. It doesn't matter what your opponent's been getting up to. This just obviously resets the board and you get to start again. As a 5-mana wrath, like it's a very reasonable rate. 5 is more or less where they've been placing this effect in recent years, especially when it's got an upside, and boy does it have an upside. So this one is also the first one to showcase the foretell mechanic, which is a new mechanic for Kaldheim. And on this card, you basically get to pay 2 mana and exile it from your hand face down, so your opponent won't know what it is. They'll just know that you've foretold something. You do need to do this, as far as I know. Actually, I'd actually assumed you only could do this at sorcery speed, but it's seemingly just only on your turn. So you could hypothetically do it at instant speed, but it needs to be on your turn. So you can't do it at the end of your opponent's turn or anything like that. And then, so you exile it for 2 generic mana, and then later, at any point in time on a later turn, notably you cannot foretell it on the same turn that you exiled it, you get to pay 3 mana and use its effect. So basically, a 3-mana wrath from your foretell exile zone, whatever you want to call it, is ridiculous. Like 3 mana for destroy all creatures is an obscenely strong effect, and it often will allow you to do something along the lines of getting to cast a wrath effect and then follow that up with a 2-drop or a 3-drop and actually get yourself back on the board first. Because often when you cast a wrath, it's kind of like, that's my turn, and then you pass to your opponent and they get the first chance to rebuild. But making it cost 3 really gives you a good shot at getting to be back on the board before your opponent is, which is a big deal. I know that people are talking about this card for constructed a lot. Obviously, in terms of limited, a wrath is just always good. 3-mana wrath even more so. And I'll talk about, like, in terms of EDH again, it's just pretty solid, honestly. I think it was LSV that went on record saying this might be one of the best wraths ever printed, which is pretty high praise from someone who is that sort of invested in the game to make a declaration like that. I wouldn't take that praise lightly. Next card is Doomscar Oracle. So 3 mana 2/3. If you whenever you cast your second spell each turn, you gain 2 life. Nothing terribly exciting there. 3 mana 2/3 is like a little below rate. The second spell clause doesn't matter too much, but notably, again, you can pay it in installments. So you pay 2 mana to foretell it, and on a later turn, you can fit this as your second spell for the turn for a single white mana, which is really nice. So again, it allows you to get your second spell for basically about as free as it can be. So this can really be a big role player in the cast 2 spells per turn archetype. But paying full retail for it is mediocre at best, I would say. But again, could be a role player if the black-white 2 spell deck is real. Which of course we'll have to wait until next week to find out. Giant Ox. It's a 2 mana 06, but it can crew vehicles, well, with its butt. It does in fact get to use its toughness rather than its power to crew, which is good because its power is 0. But basically, if you got vehicles, this is your driver. There is, I don't believe, a single vehicle in the set that has a crew cost higher than 6. So this is where you want to be at if you're trying to crew things, because it's going to block forever, and it'll get into every car you got, and yeah, this is your getaway driver, I guess. Our next car is another rare. So this is a callback to Restoration Angel for anybody who's been playing long enough to remember that card. 2 mana 3/4 flying flash, or sorry, 2 mana, sorry, 2 colorless white. So 4 mana 3/4 flying flash, but already that's a very good rate for a card. Flying and flash 3/4 body is just, it's pretty big and it's gonna get in. And then it has the added caveat of when it ETBs, you may exile any number of non-angel creatures you control. Notably, it's non-angel so that it can't go infinite with other ones of these where you just establish this like cyclical loop. So it means you can't, if we're talking about constructed, you can't exile another copy of this same card to kind of go forever with that and loop the game. So any number of non-angel creatures until it leaves the battlefield. So as long as this is here, it's essentially O-ringing all of your other permanents. There's a number of ways to use this. The sort of most obvious level 1 take on this would be to pretty much flash this in response to a wrath effect or some effect that is going to be killing one or more of your creatures. And the idea is that you save the creature under the angel, and then if the angel ever dies, you get the creature back rather than having it just die to removal earlier. Or if it's a wrath effect, you basically put all your creatures underneath this. Angel enters, everything's underneath it now, the wrath resolves, the angel dies, and everything that was underneath it comes back after the wrath. So you actually wind up more or less sacrificing this one angel in exchange for the rest of your board being protected, which is pretty cool. And then again, it does have foretell, so you can do it for 3 mana instead of 4 if you first pay 2. So you pay a little bit more overall, but it gives you a bit more flexibility as to when you can slot this into your curve later on. So a pretty cool card. And again, just very, very good on its front, and then all of those sort of use case scenarios are just kind of bonus as far as I'm concerned. Our next card is God's Hall Guardian. It is a 6 mana 3/6 Vigilance, but it has foretell for 4 mana. So again, this is another one of those cards where you can either just pay it all in one go. 6 mana 3/6 Vigilance. It's not a very exciting card, but it is pretty strong. Like, this thing can attack and block kind of with impunity. 6 toughness is a very, very high stat line. And it means you can get because it has Vigilance, it means you can attack in for 3, and if they can't just gang block it, then it's probably going to get in for 3, and then they can not really attack very well back into you because you've got a 3/6 blocker, and that's going to block most things. And again, if you have room in your curve, you get to pay 2 at some point, and later all you need to do is pay 4. And then on that turn, you essentially got yourself a 4 mana 3/6, although obviously you did need to make that initial investment somewhere in the curve. But yeah, a decent card. Maybe a space filler. I honestly don't know. This one strikes me as being a little bit clunky, but if you're playing a very defensive deck, this might be like, you might want one of these near the top of your curve just to kind of like really hold down the fort while you're trying to set up your late game. Goldmaw Champion is our next card. This is a 3 mana 2/3. And it has Boast, again, 1 and a white. That seems to be a pretty common Boast cost, from what I've seen, is 2 mana to Boast. and it taps target creature. So basically, when you attack with it, pay 2 mana, and it'll get a creature out of the way. So it can clear an annoying blocker or something like it with Death Touch or something out of the way to let you get it and whatever the rest of your team is in. It's not the best version I've ever seen of this. Like, yes, it has boasts, it's showcasing the mechanic, but there are a lot of cards, like, I'm trying to think back to, like, it was like Hammerhead something or other from Ixalan, where it was just the same card, except it just did this for free when it attacked. It was a 3-mana 2/3 that just said whenever this attacks, tap target creature. So, obviously having to pay 2 to do this is just strictly worse than that. But again, I haven't really fully checked the whole set yet. I mean, we'll find out as we go, but there might be a reason that you want to actually have it as a boast ability. Maybe there's a payoff for boasting. I don't know. This card looks a little mopey to me, but I'm not. But who knows? I could be wrong about that. Invoke the Divine. We've just got a solid sideboard card. You may want this. Maybe the format just never wants you to sideboard this in, but it does exactly what it says it does. It blows up an artifact or enchantment, gains you 4 life. If that's what you're in the market for, this is your card. But I would say probably keep this one in the sideboard more often than not. Our next card is Iron Verdict. This card I think is quite good. So Iron Verdict deals 5 damage to target tapped creature, and it is an instant. So what is nice about this is that if an opponent attacks you with a creature, you can, and obviously a Vigilance creature wouldn't work, but if they're attacking with a creature, that creature is presumably tapped. And as a result, you then get to get in to Iron Verdict that card before it actually hits you. So before the damage step, basically. So this can definitely help prevent some damage from getting in. And dealing 5 damage means it's going to deal with most creatures. 5 damage is a lot. And again, it's 3. But if you do foretell it, then all you need to do is pay 1, as long as you're prepared to do it on a later turn. Notably, a later turn can just be your opponent's next turn. So you can pay 2 and then hold up 1 and then get your opponent. But I don't know. This is again going to be more about having more efficient turns later down the line. But still, it gives you that flexibility, and the floor on this of just costing 3 to do this effect is fine. I believe the card Sandblast is this card just without foretell, so this is already just better than that because it gives you that flexibility. Next card is Kaya's Onslaught. Mechanically very similar to this card. In terms of it being a 3-mana instant that you can foretell for 1 mana later. This one gives a target creature +1/+1 and double strike until end of turn. So you can foretell this early on and then have it as a very cheap and fairly effective combat trick later down the line, or you can just pay 3 and do it right there. But if you're paying 3 for this effect, that's probably a little overcosted. This is the kind of one where you do want to sort of just, set it up early on and then get paid down the line when your opponent's like kind of forgotten about that foretell card and you just combat trick them and get them, or even get your last few points of damage in. Because if you give +1/+1 and double strike to a creature that they just chose not to block, then suddenly, you attack your 3/3 or your 3/4 even into their 3/3, and they don't really want to block that, or they don't want to trade if it's a 3/3, and then so they're like, no blocks, and then you just play this for 1 mana. Now you've got yourself a 4/4 double striker. Like, that's 8 damage. Your opponent could just die out of nowhere to something like that. So I expect that's why this is uncommon. That ability to grant double strike for such a cheap foretell cost out of nowhere could potentially end a lot of games. This is going to be a combat trick you really want to be mindful of playing around, I think. Alright, our next card is Master Skald. So 5 mana 4/4 for a Dwarf Warrior. When it enters the battlefield, you may exile a creature card from your graveyard, and if you do, you can return an artifact or enchantment from your graveyard to your hand. I don't love this. There's a lot of setup costs to this. This basically says that you need to have both a creature card in your yard that you're happy exiling. That's probably not going to be that hard. It is a 5-drop, so something's probably died between now and then. But then it also says that you need to have had an artifact or enchantment in your graveyard. Now, notably, this means that it does combo with sagas. If you've got a saga that's gone to its final chapter, that will be an artifact that just, or an enchantment that has naturally placed itself in your graveyard. It might work well with the Guild, the Bound in Gold that we saw earlier. If somebody got it off their creature, you can then later buy it back. So it's not nothing, but it does need to jump through a couple of hoops to actually accomplish something. But I mean, a 5 mana 4/4, while not being particularly exciting, is still a very reasonably statted body, so you're not going to be like super embarrassed to play this, but you're not going to want more than 1, and you're not always going to even want the 1, I would say. Our next card is another rare. It's called Rally the Ranks. Excuse me, a bit of a hiccup there. Rally the Ranks, so it's a 2-mana enchantment. When it ETBs, you choose a creature type, and then all creatures you control of the chosen type just get +1/+1. So this is a glorious anthem for 2 mana, but with the caveat that it only affects creatures of a specific type rather than all of your creatures. Which I think is a perfectly fine downside to mitigate the fact that it does cost 2. Obviously, picking this card early is probably not bad. It's a good rare, it's cheap, so it can fit on your curve pretty nicely. And all it means is that you're going to want to try to build around having a specific creature type. Notably, I just want to point out that there are a lot of warriors in white. Angel Warrior, Dwarf Warrior, Dwarf Warrior, Warrior. So white cards have a lot of warriors in them, so naming Warrior is probably going to be fine a lot of the time. That seems like it'll be a pretty solid thing to be able to bet on, and like, you know, you'll know your deck, you'll know what you want to do. In sealed, this is going to be either it's good or it's not, but in draft, if you pick this early, you can definitely build your deck around it, and then just have this like 2-mana anthem effect that is more or less all of your creatures going to be affected by that, which seems really good to me. I definitely think this card is quite solid. It's not incredible or anything. There are probably some uncommons I would pick over it, though none of the ones I've seen so far I would. In white, but yeah, it's a good card. I think that in a draft, it's probably worth picking it early and trying to shape a deck around it because the payoff is solid. Our next card is Resplendent Marshal. This is our first mythic of the set that we've come across. Our first white mythic. So it is a 3/3 flying angel warrior for 3. So already that's a ridiculously good rate. A 3/3 for 3 is just a very, very good rate. Like, this is a creature you'd play all the time. And it has, whenever it enters the battlefield or dies, you may exile another creature card from your yard. When you do, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control other than the Marshal that shares a type with the exiled card. So this is another sort of tribal matters card. Again, warrior is probably going to be what you name more often than not. So sadly, this thing will never grow larger than a 3/3. It distinctly does not pump itself. But this will give a permanent anthem effect by virtue of putting a 1/1 counter on every other creature you control that shares a type. So again, this part may or may not happen, but it gives you 2 cracks at it, both on ETB and on dies. And then, yeah, you kind of get a good shot at, like, sort of giving a perma buff to your team for a very, very low rate. And again, the fact that it's just a 3/3 flying flyer for 3 is just good. Like, you'll always play this card. I don't know if it's like, again, I think I would first pick this card pretty often, just because of the rate. There might be, again, an uncommon or 2 that might be better than this in a pack. We'll have to get to that, but so far, this is definitely a very first pickable card. Revitalize, 2-mana, gain 3, draw card. I don't really get this one. Like, it's a card. It cantrips. I think this card is bad. I'll amend that opinion if I find cards that actually care about life gain, where gaining life matters, if this is like an enabler for that archetype. But I don't think there are cards like that in this set, that at least none that I can remember. So I'll eat my words later if I find the card for it. But I'm going to go ahead and say never pick this card. This card is bad. All right, next card is Righteous Valkyrie. So this is a 3-mana 2/4 flyer. Again, super solid stat line already. It's a flying body. It blocks reasonably well. It attacks for 2 in the air. Not much to hate already. Whenever another angel or cleric enters the battlefield under your control, you gain life equal to that creature's toughness. So again, rewarding you for some sort of small tribal synergies. There are many angels in both white and black, and I believe both the white and black angels are mostly clerics, or though some of them are warriors, but they're also angels. So the idea is, yeah, all angels and all clerics are just going to get you a bunch of life. And then, yeah, wow, okay, I'd seen this card earlier, but I'd kind of forgotten about it. But yeah, if you have 7 or more life than your starting life total, creatures you control just gain +2/+2, just permanently. That's an anthem. So all your creatures just have +2/+2, and that includes itself. So if you ever hit 27 life, you now just have a 3-mana 4/6 angel that gives all your other creatures +2/+2 as well. So to be fair, this card might be good in your deck. I ate my words pretty quickly there, although even then, it's still pretty fringe. But if you're really trying to get this card working, that card might get you there. But yeah, this card is sweet. I'll first pick this card a lot. I think this card is very, very good. I think it's like probably the best rare we've seen so far, though this one is probably a close competitor to that. It might even be better than the Resplendent Marshal, but I'm not sure about that, but they feel pretty comparable to me. It'll depend on how often you can trigger the martial ability, I think. All right, Rune of Sustenance. So this is a new card type, actually. There have never been runes in Magic before, so it is another subtype of enchantment. And I believe all the ones in this set, at least, are auras. I believe all runes are auras, but I'm not dead certain about that. Why did my light just die? Did I? What? Oh, I'm gonna pause the recording for a second. They're on the video, but. Oh, yeah, there we go. I think I must have just kicked it out of its socket. That's weird. But anyway. Alright. What was I saying? Right, so 2 mana for an enchant permanent. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card. So notably, this can actually just attach itself to anything. It doesn't actually need, but we'll see why you want it to attach to specific things. But if you literally just want to spend it as 2 mana draw card, you can do that. Like it basically sort of cycles itself at sorcery speed. That wouldn't be great as a use case, but you can do it if you're really just trying to, like, you know, if you're top decking, you're kind of behind, you just really want to get to a better card. That being said, as long as the enchanted permanent is a creature, it has lifelink. So this basically just is a 2 mana aura that grants lifelink to the thing it's attached to. But notably, it can also attach itself to an equipment, and then it basically adds a line of text to that equipment that says equipped creature has lifelink. So it more or less adds the lifelink ability to that equipment, which is cool. Or rather, not specifically to the equipment, but to the creature that it is equipped to. Our next card is Runeforged Champion. So this is obviously a bit of a callback to Stoneforge Mystic, where when it ETBs, you search your library and graveyard for a rune card, reveal it, and put it in your hand. And then if you did search your library this way, you shuffle it. So it does buy back your runes. So you've drawn your card off of it. Maybe they killed the thing it was attached to. This guy can come in fact, and pick that up again. Or it can just pull it out of your library if you haven't found it yet. And then it makes the runes cost only 1. It reduces the cost by 1 for rune spells. I don't love the runes at 2 mana, frankly. I've there's one in each of the colors, and I don't think they're amazing. But I do think that for 1 mana, they become substantially better. But of course, you do need a rare for that. I think that this card is worth drafting early. Again, it is a form of card advantage, both in the fact that it picks up another card and then the card it picks up itself cantrips. So it's a good way to get a little bit of card advantage, especially in white. And if you do pick this early, you're going to want to prioritize finding probably 2 to 3 runes if you can. But the downside is you don't really want like a bunch of runes in your deck. You really probably are only going to want 1 or 2, actually. 3 is probably already getting to too many. But I do think this card is solid. This card is solid and represents a nice little bit of card advantage in a color that often struggles to get that. Search for Glory. So this is a snow sorcery. So this is the first time we've actually seen snow on non-permanents, basically. So this is actually a new concept. So on this one lets you search your library for a snow permanent card, a legendary card, or a saga card, reveal it, and then put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. You gain 1 life for each snow mana spent to cast a spell. So you can gain as much as 3 life if all 3 mana you used came from snow sources. So it's basically a weird tutor. It does a relatively wide array of cards that you can tutor for. Any snow permanent, notably you can't like chain search for glories together if you somehow open multiples, but any snow permanent, any legendary, or any saga, which is a relatively wide array of permanents, and these are all probably decent permanents. It's worth mentioning. I'm not a big fan of tutor effects, generally speaking, in limited. The card you're looking for has to be like really freaking good to be worth it. But if you do open like a really busted mythic legendary or something, having this in your deck sort of just as a pseudo second copy of that card might be good. But it's going to be very, very situational, and it's not a card I would pick early. Like, this is not a rare you first pick. This is a rare that kind of falls into your lap, and you're like, you know what? I do have a really good card to go look for. Let's put that in our deck. But you're not. This is not a build around. This is not like. This is going to be like incidentally good, not overtly good. So my advice early in the format would be to avoid picking this card. Unless you're rare drafting, then just grab the card, and you don't need to grab many of it later on in the format. Shepherd of the Cosmos is our next card. So this is a 6 mana 3/3 flyer. So on its face, that's not a good set of stats. 6 mana for a 3/3 flyer is pretty brutally overcosted. Let's see what we get for that. When Shepherd of the Cosmos enters the battlefield, return target permanent card with converted mana cost 2 or less from your graveyard directly to the battlefield. So notably, this does go, as I said, directly to the battlefield, not to your hand. So that is pretty powerful, but it only targets permanents with permanent cost 2 or less. So Sun Titan, this is not. Not by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just going to quickly flick back just to look at the cards we've already seen, see what this interacts with. This could pick up the Rune of Sustenance. It could pick up Rally the Ranks. It could pick up... not a lot so far. A Goad Spell Cleric, I guess. A Beskir Shieldmate, that's kind of cool, I suppose. Clarion Spirit. Look, I'm not sure that this card is real. I don't think it's that good, which is a damn shame because it's got gorgeous art. I think Johannes Voss did a lot of the art in this set, including a lot of the art that was sort of Aurora-based. Even this next card is Johannes as well. The basic island for this set is absolutely glorious and is Johannes art. That's a tangent, though. That's not about how good the cards are. That's just how pretty they are. The bottom line is I don't think this card is good. You can foretell it for 2 and then you can like exile it for 2 and then foretell it for 4, sort of breaking up that payment of 6 mana into 2 slightly more manageable chunks. I don't know. I might be sleeping on this card. Maybe it's better than I think it is, but I'm not very excited. Notably, this also doesn't work with the cast 2 spells mechanic, because the card that comes back to the battlefield, while you do get an extra spell out of it, doesn't count as cast and therefore doesn't help with any of your cast 2 spell synergies there. I don't know. I'm not very high on this card. I think this is a bit of a lame one. A little bit disappointed as an uncommon, but whatever. They can't all be all-stars. Moving on, we've got Sigrid God Favored. This is another rare, and also notably, I think, our first legendary creature of the set. So this is a 3-mana 2/2 flash. It has first strike and protection from gods, which is kind of cool. Not going to come up super often in a game of limited, I expect. Since this is a rare, and I believe all the gods are rare or mythic, so going to be a set of circumstances. It'll happen at some point, but not going to be a frequently relevant line of text. However, when it enters the battlefield, exile up to 1 target attacking or blocking creature until Sigrid leaves the battlefield. So this card is really cool, actually. What this does is it really lets you kind of make combat like pretty okay for you. If you are the most frequent scenario is basically your opponent attacks with a bunch of creatures because they have a pretty good attack, but then you flash this in, exile like their best creature or a creature that's letting other creatures do something, get that thing out of the way, and then you get to make slightly better blocks. You get to use her as a blocker potentially. Mind you, she is very small, but she also does have first strike, which means that does make her a pretty reasonable blocker, especially out of nowhere. On the flip side, if you're making an attack and your opponent sort of, blocks your creature, then gives their own creature a pump spell, then you get to exile that blocking creature and therefore sort of fizzling the pump spell and saving your own creature from dying. Now, notably, this doesn't mean you're going to get any damage in unless that creature has trample. But it can really, this thing really messes with combat both offensively and defensively, and I think that that's a really cool thing to have. It's obviously rare, so you're not going to see it all the time, but I do think this card is good, and is definitely first pickable, I believe. Okay, Spectral Steel, our next card. So this is an aura, not a rune, this one, just a regular aura. 2 mana, enchant creature. The creature gets +2/+2, and you can exile this from your graveyard to return another aura or equipment card from your graveyard to your hand. So it's not bad. I mean, 2 mana to give a creature a permanent +2/+2 is fine. And it does mitigate the downside of auras a little bit. Again, auras are a little bit sketchy because you don't really want to be like sort of going too all in on a creature. Auras are notoriously susceptible to creature removal, which is obviously never a great place to be. But this one does give you a little extra gravy out of your graveyard, so either you got in with the creature a couple times and they killed it, or maybe they did kill the creature in response to you trying to enchant it, but then he still gets to do a thing later. Though you do need to have another aura equipment card, so it's a bit of a hoop, but it's not the worst. It's not the worst. I think this card is fine. The fact that, again, it's an uncommon tells me Wizards also believes that this card is going to be probably better than it looks. But we'll have to see. I think this card is okay, but again, it's an aura, so very much take this with a grain of salt, or like, be cautious if you pick this card, because yeah, auras always do have a bit of a downside that way. Our next card is Stalwart Valkyrie. So this is a 4-mana 3/4 or 3/2 flyer. Not an incredible rate or anything. I think that's a Snapping Drake is probably the vanilla equivalent of this card. But if you have a creature in your graveyard, you get to exile a creature in your graveyard and pay 2 mana rather than pay its cost. So basically, If you have a creature in your yard that you just know is never coming back, you're never going to pick it up, you don't have any spells that let you buy creatures back, whatever, you actually just get a 2-mana 3/2 flyer, and that's actually like a ridiculously good rate. Now, notably, you're not going to get to do that on turn 2 very often, so it's not like this is going to be a turn 2, a 3/2 flyer for 2. But again, it means that this is going to work really well in your 2 spells deck, because going like, playing a 3-drop and then exiling a creature that died on turns 2, 3, 4, and then paying 2 to get this as your as a 2-drop is a really, really good curve. Because yeah, paying 2 mana for a 3/2 flyer is just a good rate. So I think this card is going to be secretly one of the, well, maybe not secretly, I don't know. I say that like nobody else knows this yet. I think this card is going to be a pretty good card in the in most decks, frankly, because again, exiling a single creature from your right isn't a huge cost. And again, in the 2 spell deck, this looked really strong to me. Our next card is Kaldheim Courser. So this is a 3-mana 2/2 flyer. So again, this is a Windrake with a little bit of upside, and that upside is that artifacts and enchantment spells you cast cost 1 less. So I think it's the first time we see artifact, like generic artifact reduction in white. There's been equipment cost casting reductions before, but never just straight up artifacts. This card looks fine. Again, in limited, this is at worst a 3-mana 2/2 flyer, which is a very fine card. It's not incredible or anything, but it's totally serviceable. And if you do have artifacts and enchantments to cast, like, that's not bad. That makes, again, this Spectral Steel cost 1 mana, which is a whole lot more appealing than 2 mana. 2 mana for a permanent +2/+2 stat boost is really, really nice. You could make this a 4/4 flyer, essentially for 4 mana on the single turn, or you play this on turn 3, and then on turn 4, you play like another 3-drop and then equip your Spectral Steel to this or something else and just get in for 4. That's powerful. That seems really strong to me. I think this is a good little common. Nothing super exciting, but just like a good, solid kind of bread and butter playable. Flying always makes you take a little bit of a harder look at cards. All right, so this is our second white mythic. This is 4 mana. It's a 4-mana sorcery, and you get to create a 4/4 white angel warrior creature token with flying and vigilance. So already that's very good. That's literally just a Sarah Angel, which is a 5-mana card for 4 mana. So this is just like kind of absurd on rate already. A 4-mana 4/4 flying vigilance is a ridiculous card. You'll windmill slam this every time. This is, I believe, so far the best. Well, I mean, it's definitely better than the other white mythic, I think. And it's like just very, very, very good. This is an easy windmill slam no matter what. And then it has the added gravy of being a foretell card as well, where you can exile it for 2 mana, and then at any point later in time, you can foretell this for for a white and for XX white, and then you make X angels instead of a single one. So basically for 3 mana, so if you paid 2, then later for 3 mana, you can get a 4/4 flyer, which essentially is like a Sarah Angel in 2 installments. But again, it scales. So if you pay 5 into this, you get 2 4/4 flying vigilance. And somehow if you're paying 7 into this, you get 3 of them. And like then you're just like, oh, like now we're going to the moon. But yeah, no, this card is absurd. This card is really, really, really good. No matter which version of this you cast, be it the foretell or the regular, it's awesome. It's really good. It's sweet. So here we have a Story Seeker, 2-mana 2/2 lifelink. So this is basically just your French vanilla Grizzly Bear. It's a fine card. Good against aggro, solid little body. Good to put equipment on, like and stuff on. Like if you play this on turn 2 and then like actually get in a hit with a Spectral Steel on there, that's 4 mana or 4 lifelink damage. That's solid. It's nothing to write home about, but it's probably going to be a role player. I think that it's just a good little curve filler, especially if you're just playing an aggressive deck. Usher of the Fallen is a 1-mana 2/1. Already I'm interested. That's, obviously above rate. I expect this will probably be pretty good if there's a constructed white weenie deck. In limited, it's probably a fine card just because it's a 2-mana or 1-mana 2/1 that has an ability. So this one says Boast. When you attack, make a 1/1 white human warrior creature token. So play this on turn 1, and then even if you don't have any plays on turn 2, you get to attack with this and make a 1/1 out of it, and either you're not going to want to trade for your opponent's 1/1, but there's also a decent chance your opponent won't have played, especially if you're on the play. There's a decent chance your opponent won't have played anything on turn 1, in which case you basically just got to get in for 2 damage and get a 1/1 for free, more or less. So I think that's pretty solid. Valkyrie Sword. Oh, okay, so there's a cycle of colored equipment that is sort of loosely tribally linked, where basically you it's an equipment, but if you pay an additional amount of mana, you also get to make a creature token that it comes equipped to. So in this case, this is a 2 mana equipment that is equipped 3, and it gives equipped creature +2/+1. That's it. On its front, not a particularly exciting card. Like, 2 mana for +2/+1 is okay, but the equipped 3 is like pretty bad. But you can, if you pay 7 mana, then you get to make a which is to say like an additional 5. You get to make a 4/4 White Angel Warrior creature token, with Flying and Vigilance, so the same one that comes from here. And now you've essentially got yourself a 7 mana 6/5 flying with Flying Vigilance, which is pretty good. It's like a decent thing to just dump some mana into in the late game. I'm not super excited about this, but it might be good just because of the way that it's sort of modal that way, where you can kind of pay the kicker cost on it, as it were, and get a bit of an upside about it. I'm not in love with it, but it's not the worst. Next one is Valor of the Worthy. So this is another aura. A enchanted creature gets +1/+1, and when it leaves the battlefield, notably not just dies, but leaves the battlefield. So this works if your opponent bounces it or something. You get to create a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. So again, this is one of those cards that sort of mitigates a little bit of the disadvantage of like putting auras on your creatures, where if they do remove the creature with the aura, you still get a little bit out of it. So you're not just getting like completely 2-for-1'd. Obviously, if you go to equip this and they kill it in response, then you've gotten 2-for-1, and that's always the risk of auras, but not a bad one, and a relatively cheap card. I don't know if this will be good. We'll see again how good the auras, if there's like an auras deck. There are quite a few in white, so I'm wondering if that is a thing, maybe, but yeah, generally speaking, not incredible, but not the worst either. Next is Warhorn Blast. Pretty sure this card is terrible. 5 mana to give your creatures +2/+1 is not a particularly good rate, and even if you're paying that in installments, like, the ability to pay 3 to get this effect is better, but I just don't think that this effect is worth putting a card in your deck, if we're being honest. I don't think this card is good. I wouldn't play it, unless you have, like, an absurdly go-wide token strategy, and then maybe it can be, like, a good finisher, but you even then you'd only want 1, and, like, it's pretty mopey. I'm not super into it. And then our last white card is Wings of the Cosmos. So this is a 1 mana instant. And it gives target creature +1/+3 and gains flying, and you get to untap it. So I actually think this is a good little combat trick. You're not going to want to load up on this. Like, 1 is going to often be the most you'll want to play. But the fact that this plays reasonably well, both aggressively and defensively, is quite nice. So what you can do is in your attack step, you go, you declare your attacks, and you just need to chip in a little extra damage. You get to basically attack with a creature, it taps, and then before your opponent goes to blocks, you get to cast this spell and make your creature fly, do a little bit more damage, and then it's untapped so that it can then be ready to defend on the next turn. Odds are that's not going to be what you're doing. More often than not, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be playing this defensively, where your opponent makes an attack with like a couple of flyers or something, and then you can just surprise block with a creature that was tapped, and it gains flying, which means it now also blocks flyers. So this combat trick seems very versatile. It also has like really awesome like wolf owl art, which I'm like low-key just a fan of from that perspective. No, I honestly think that this is a really cool card. I think this is a solid combat trick, and definitely something you're going to want to watch out for if you're playing against the white deck. And if they have as little as 1 mana tap, just be aware that this card exists. Because if you're making a seemingly good attack with your flyers into their tapped out board of not flyers, you may not be as safe as you thought. So this is definitely one to keep in mind because of how low the opportunity cost is for it. Okay. So that is it for the white cards. So we're just gonna take a quick ad break